The phone call lasts about 4 minutes. You ask how they're doing. They say they're fine. You ask if they need anything. They say no, everything's good. You tell them you'll call again soon. They say, okay, and you hang up. And then, sometimes right away, sometimes hours later, something small stays with you. Not what they said. More like the way they said it, the flatness of it, the speed. The way "I'm fine" came out before you even finished asking. You pushed the thought away. They said they were fine. That's what they said. But something in you doesn't quite believe it. Here's the thing. You're probably right not to. For a lot of elderly parents, "I'm fine" is not a description of how they're feeling. It's a decision they made before you even called, a choice about what to say and what not to say. And the gap between those two things, what they say and what they're actually carrying, is where a lot of quiet suffering lives. This video is about that gap, let's be clear, about something right away. When an elderly parent says, "I'm fine," and doesn't mean it, they're not lying in the way we usually think about lying. They're not trying to deceive you. Most of the time, they're trying to protect something, themselves, you, the relationship. Sometimes all three at once. Think about what happens when an older parent tells their adult child that something is really wrong, that they're lonely, that they're scared, that they didn't sleep well, because they kept thinking about a doctor's appointment, or a neighbor they haven't heard from, or a name they couldn't remember for a few seconds. And that small silence felt like a threat. Think about what often happens after that kind of honesty. The phone call gets longer. The worry in the child's voice becomes audible. Sometimes there are suggestions. You should see someone. You should move closer. Maybe it's time to think about. And suddenly, the conversation that started with honesty becomes something that feels like being handled. A lot of elderly parents have had that experience, maybe more than once. And "I'm fine" becomes the shorter path, the one that keeps things calm, the one that ends the call without making you worry. That's not deception. That's a form of management, a very human one. There's a phrase that comes up a lot when elderly people talk honestly about how they relate to their families. "I don't want to be a burden." It's one of the most common fears in old age. Not pain, not illness, not even death, but becoming too much, needing too much, taking up more space than feels acceptable. And this fear doesn't usually come from nowhere. It comes from watching, from paying attention to how people around them respond when needs get bigger. The slight tension in a voice, the busyness that suddenly appears after certain conversations, the visits that get a little shorter each time. Elderly parents are perceptive in ways we often underestimate. They notice, they track. And over time, many of them make a quiet decision. It's easier to say, "I'm fine," than to risk what telling the truth might cost. This is dignity protecting itself. Not through pride exactly, but through control. When almost everything else is changing, the body, the schedule, the level of independence, the ability to manage what you reveal to others is one of the last things that still belongs to you. "I'm fine" is sometimes the only thing they feel fully in charge of, and that's worth sitting with for a second. Because what looks like avoidance from the outside can be the last available form of self-respect from the inside. There's another layer to this, and it matters. Most people who are elderly today grew up in a time when expressing emotional or psychological distress was not something you did openly. You pushed through. You didn't talk about feeling sad or scared or lost. You found a way to function, and you kept going. That wasn't weakness. It was adaptation. It was what the world asked of them. So, "I'm fine" is also generational. For many elderly parents, saying that things are hard isn't a natural habit. It was never modeled. In many cases, it was actively discouraged. They learned early that vulnerability was something you kept inside, or shared only in a real crisis, and even then, carefully. This doesn't mean they don't want to be heard. Many of them do, deeply. But wanting to be heard and knowing how to ask for it are different things. And when the habit of saying "I'm fine" goes back 50 or 60 years, it doesn't just disappear because someone is now asking more carefully. The words stay the same. The need underneath them changes. And here's where most families get it wrong. They hear the same answer for so long that they stop questioning it. The script becomes the truth, until something happens that makes the distance suddenly visible. And by then, a lot of time has passed. Here's where it gets more specific. I'm fine doesn't always mean the same thing. The same two words can carry very different weight depending on context, tone, and what's been happening in that person's life. Sometimes I'm fine means I'm not fine, but I don't know how to say that without everything changing. Sometimes it means I've been lonely today, and I don't want to make you feel guilty about that. Sometimes it means I'm scared about something, and if I say it out loud, it becomes more real. Sometimes it means I tried to tell someone last week and they changed the subject. I'm not sure it's worth trying again. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it means I want you to ask again, a little slower, with a little more room. The difference between a question that gets I'm fine and one that gets something more honest is often not the words themselves. It's the pace, whether the person asking is already halfway to the next thing, whether it feels like a check-in or an actual conversation. Elderly parents can sense the difference between being asked and being asked. And when they feel the first kind, the quick, routine kind, I'm fine, is the only answer that fits the space they've been given. If something in what you just heard is landing, if you're thinking about a parent, a grandparent, someone you love who almost always says they're fine, stay with this. Because what comes next gets into the specific signals that appear around that phrase, the things that show up when someone means more than they're saying. If this is resonating, a like takes 2 seconds and it tells me this kind of content is worth going deeper on. Let's keep going. There's a reason the phrase is never quite enough on its own, because around I'm fine, other things tend to appear. Small things, easy to miss but consistent once you know what to look for. There's the phone call that ends too quickly, not because they're busy, because they've been waiting for it, and now that it's happening, they don't know what to do with. The feeling. There's the repeated story. The same one, told again, from 10 or 30 years ago, which can seem like memory fading, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it's something else entirely. A person returning to a time when they felt significant, when what they did mattered. When there was still a version of themselves they could point to and say, that's who I am. There's the flat okay at the end of a sentence, the one that doesn't push back, doesn't comment, doesn't argue. In someone who used to have opinions about everything, that kind of quiet can mean something. There's the moment they say, don't worry about me. And if you listen to that phrase carefully, it's asking for the exact opposite of what it says. None of these signals are loud. None of them demand anything. They're designed not to. Because asking directly would require risking rejection. And at a certain age, after enough years of sensing how much space you're allowed to take up, many people stop asking. Directly altogether. The signal stays small. And it waits. So what actually changes when you start hearing I'm fine differently? Not as an answer. As a starting point, you don't have to turn every phone call into a long emotional conversation. You don't have to push. That would probably make things worse because it would confirm what they suspected, that honesty leads to intensity, and intensity is exhausting. But there's a real difference between accepting an answer and receiving it. Accepting it means moving on. Receiving it means staying in the conversation a little longer. Asking about something specific, not how are you but how was Tuesday, or did you end up watching that thing you mentioned, or I was thinking about what you said last time. It means treating the call like something that has weight, not just maintenance. Elderly parents who say, I'm fine, aren't usually asking to be saved. They're asking to exist in someone's attention for a few minutes, to be present in a relationship that still moves toward them, not out of obligation, but out of actual interest. That's a small thing to give, but it requires slowing down enough to notice when I'm fine is a door left slightly open and not a wall. Here's what I want to leave you with. I'm fine is one of the most rehearsed phrases in the language. People say it automatically, reflexively, without thinking. But in an elderly parent, it often carries the weight of a much longer story, one that involves dignity, fear, a lifetime of learning not to need too much, and a very specific kind of love, the love that tries not to take up space. Understanding that doesn't mean you can fix it. It means you can stop treating it as the end of a sentence. The next time you hear it, you don't have to respond differently right away. But maybe you pause. Maybe you hear it for what it might actually be, not a statement about how they're doing, but a quiet way of protecting something they're still not sure. It's safe to share. That pause is worth more than most people realize. If you want to keep going with this, if you're trying to understand the deeper psychology behind what elderly people don't say, the silences, the small behaviors that only make sense when you know what you're really looking at, I made a video that goes exactly there. It's called The Hidden Psychology Behind Elderly People Sitting in Silence, and a lot of what we touched on today runs much deeper in that one. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. I'll see you there.